All right, returning to the show after about, what is it, 6 months of primary coverage on Elections Daily is Elections Daily Editor-in-Chief Eric Cunningham. Welcome back to the show, Eric.
Happy to be here.
So, a lot has happened. I think it's fair to say. You know, I think if we were having this interview, I would say, 9 or 10 months ago, or maybe even 4 months ago, we would probably be saying, red wave incoming, Republicans to win massive majorities. But things have changed. You want to go over that?
It looks like some things have. I'm a little bit less tentative on the red wave is dead discussion, because basically what we're seeing right now is we're seeing kind of the national polls converge a little bit more towards Biden. I think it's about a 6-7 point approval swing in RCP, that's a substantial amount, but he's still deeply underwater. Generic ballot polls are actually looking better for Republicans somehow. On the congressional level, usually it's about a 1 to 3 point lead.
Really?
There's a couple that are giving, I think YouGov, which has always been bad for Republicans, is giving about a 5 to 7 point lead for Democrats, but that's pretty much always been the case. So, right. And district polls remain pretty favorable for Republicans. So basically, what we're dealing with right now is a polling environment that at the statewide level looks pretty good for Democrats in most of the states. Most of the Senate states, in particular, the ones that are up. So on that end, yes, it's certainly not looking as favorable for Republicans as we would have said even a couple months ago. The special elections have also been very, very disappointing, to put it mildly, for Republicans. When it's one special election, it's one thing. When it's three, because you got the Nebraska.
Yeah.
You got the Nebraska one, you've got Minnesota, and then you got New York.
Two New York, in fact.
Yeah, to New York. Granted, all these do have, at least upstate is very, very picky. They can be a little bit difficult in special elections. And the Nebraska seat and the Minnesota seat both had a large college-educated area that Democrats could build a base off of. The fact that all four of those have shown a Democratic improvement from previous special election results should be concerning for Republicans at minimum. I think they're taking this seriously.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say that special elections are showing a Democratic advantage. I think the generic ballot, I thought I saw it ticking up for Democrats, but I mean, it's showing, I think, a neutral environment, whereas district by district, I think, is showing a Republican advantage. So
the district polling and the district polling is looking very different from statewide and generic ballot polling.
Yeah, and but the other thing to keep in mind is that I think Biden's approval rating, I think, is also ticking up now. Apparently it's better than Obama, not as good as H.W. Bush at this point.
That's not what I've seen. Basically, so let me pull up the real quick, because I want to have the number right off the top of my head here. It's comparable to what Trump was at, as far as I can tell, and like the actual. So right now, according to Real Clear Politics, he's at a 42 to 54 disapproval.
Right.
Some of this is kind of skewed by Rasmussen, which I've never considered a credible pollster. So basically, in the last 2 weeks, so since the 12th, he's been down 13, 18, 12, 10, 19, 13. And the last three were 9, 10, and 8. Those are Emerson, CBS News, and Rasmussen.
But the trend has been upward, though.
The trend is upward, yeah. Like, so compared to like a month ago, July 20th, he was at about a 37% disapproval, 57%, 37% approval, 57% disapproval. Now he's closer to a 54.4 to 42. So that's basically going from being down close to 20 to being down closer to 12. So yeah, that is an improvement, but it's still not a whole lot to write home about. It's just not as abysmal as before.
Right.
I think, generally, historically, you've needed the president to be above water in favorability to actually gain seats. Or in the House. What we're still looking at is overall an environment Republicans should be favored to win the House in. The Senate is a lot more iffy. Could very well be 50-50. Could very well be Democrats gain a seat or two, because some of the candidate quality in Arizona in particular is.
And in the Senate, we're going to give you a chance to throw some darts at some of those Republicans in just a second, okay?
Yeah.
Yeah. But I was going to say that, I think it's fair to say that I think the hopium and the copium, I think, have switched sides in recent weeks. And people I've heard actually have been, I don't know if this is realistic, but some people are mentioning possibility that this could basically be like the 1998 midterms. Potentially.
That's unrealistic. That's very unrealistic. Very unrealistic. Keep in mind, even a so-called neutral environment, if we're saying it's literally zero, that's a 4-point swing from 2020 still. That's a 4-point swing to the right. Biden won by about 4 points. If we're talking an actual neutral environment that where it's even, both sides are evenly split, that would be you'd still expect Republicans to gain seats because that'd still be a 4-point swing to the right.
Right.
It's actually really, really difficult. So I would consider that to be far out of the picture. Again, Biden is deeply underwater at this point still, but Republicans have a lot of vulnerability on abortion and on some really, really questionable Senate candidates. The House, though, is looking a lot better. Again, I don't think I've seen any credible forecast that says Republicans are not going to gain the House.
Right.
The floor has just kind of been shifting from like maybe 240 to 230 as a more realistic. We at Elections Daily have them at 218 right now, and then 24 other toss-ups. 218 is a bare majority. That's the absolute minimum for a majority. Even 12, if you could get 12 of those, that'd be 230. That's still dealing with the Freedom Caucus. That's not necessarily too workable. But it's still a majority. It'll be very, very difficult, I think, for Democrats to hold the House with this scenario.
Right. But even with like district level polling, some people will point out that the New York 19th was actually a polling miss in favor of the Democrats.
Yeah, it was a polling miss.
Yeah, and some people argue that if you have like a candidate like Molinaro, who is by all accounts a 5-star recruit, and he still loses and actually underperforms Trump, then that should raise a 5-alarm fire.
I think it probably has, but again, we're dealing with special elections. Right. Special elections are a different thing. What we saw was, in particular in the 23rd, was massive Democratic turnout in Ithaca, and 85% Democrats getting 85% of the vote in Ithaca. That was by far the biggest swing. Is that realistic in November, that Democrats have by far and away larger turnout in Ithaca and they're getting 85% of the vote there? Probably not, but even a moderate swing back would be an improvement from where they were. I think people on both sides need to be a little bit more realistic as to what we're looking at here and what an actual neutral environment would look like. The Senate would be the most interesting because Republican candidates are by and large not good. They've got reasonable enough recruits in Nevada and North Carolina. Those are one of those states they already hold, one of those states they don't hold right now. But they have really bad recruits in Arizona, in Arizona in particular. Ohio, they're needing to spend money. That's not a state they're going to lose, but they need to spend money there to prevent it from getting bleeding. Pennsylvania, we've been a little bit more bullish on than most. We still have that at a toss-up, and most of the more recent polls, I think 2 of the last 3 have had it within 5. Even then, that's still a massive underperformance. Oz has not been a very good candidate at all. So the Senate is really the more interesting area. There's not a ton of gubernatorial excitement this time around so far. The House is pretty boring. Again, Republicans have fairly favorable redistricting in states like Florida, Ohio. So I would say, again, it would be very, very much a challenge to have 1988. In 1988, you would need a very, very popular president like Bill Clinton was then. Biden is not that. He's still 12 points underwater. And that's if you account for Rasmussen, which I would generally not include Rasmussen in any list of credible pollsters whatsoever. Even when they were doing, I never considered them credible when they were favoring Republicans. I don't consider them credible when they have Biden only down 8.
Yeah, it's funny how Trafalgar and Rasmussen are now seeming to skew Democrat right now.
Yeah, I disregard Trafalgar as well. Data for Progress. There's pollsters that I don't regard as being very credible. Rasmussen, Data for Progress, and Trafalgar. Those are the 3 that are just. I try to ignore what they say.
All right, Eric, we're gonna move to a segment I guess we'll call populist dart throwing contest. Let the dart throwing commence. Let's talk about the Arizona GOP. Throw the darts, Eric.
Yeah, so Arizona, what really baffles me with this is not so much the Masters pivot. This was expected for any rational campaign. It would be ridiculous if Blake Masters was going to run an entire 2022 campaign on election fraud and a bunch of just the stuff he was running the primary on. The problem is it's not believable at all. And they already tried this twice in 2018 and 2020. McSally had to move right for the primary and then to the center for the general. That sounds like a good idea until you try it and realize it doesn't work. What's maybe even worse here is that Masters doesn't even make a credible moderate. He's established himself to the voters. McSally at least had a moderate voting record. She had a record if she had run on it is defensible, very defensible for a moderate state, for a state like Arizona. She had to run to the right to deal with a couple of crazy primary challengers, but she had a credible record. Masters is backtracking on the campaign pledges he made only a few months ago. He's dropping the signature issues he focused on that got him that. And it's kind of baffling as to why conservative Republicans who had 6 years to plan for this, who had 6 years to plan for the strategy, whenever they take the party back, their plan is just to do what Martha McSally did, but worse. I really don't get it. I don't want to rag on, I do want to rag on Masters for being a bad candidate, but I don't want to rag on him for the strategy, because I'm glad he's at least pivoting. That's a better chance of winning than if you're running on election fraud, you're running on repealing Griswold, you're running on a no exception abortion ban, fetal, like those aren't popular things. I'm glad he's getting rid of those. My question is why they were there to begin with.
But the problem is the internet makes things permanent, and those clips can be replayed over and over again in the general. It's kind of lessens the impact of a pivot.
Yeah, it's not a realistic pivot. Again, Masters had a bizarre campaign strategy in the primary. It worked. It got him the Trump endorsement. But that was with a bunch of Peter Thiel's money. Thiel is not spending anything in these general elections with his candidates. I don't think he's down 10. I think he can still win. I do, though, think he's a better candidate than Lake, but he's running against a far better incumbent, a far better Democrat in Mark Kelly. And he's going to need to defend a lot of things that he said in the primary that aren't really that amenable to the voters of Arizona at large. He really set himself up very poorly here, unfortunately.
Arizona in general, it seems like for the statewide offices, it seems like Republicans nominated I want to say 3 election deniers, one of whom was a former oath keeper, and then they also nominated a very corrupt guy for another office. It seems like Kimberly was the only sane person they nominated.
Yeah, I mean, again, part of this is what basically happens when you just let a party atrophy. These conservatives insisted for years, and I wouldn't even want to call them conservatives. These right wingers, certainly more aggressive. Yeah, they're not all populists. Some of these are just genuine nutcases, and they've been that way for 20 years. Some of them are
Carrie Lake.
Yeah, some of them are populists. Some of them are just conservatives who have been trying to do this sort of stuff since the Tea Party, and it's never worked. This is how you get Jesse Kelly running for the House, not once but twice, losing in a Bush, McCain, Romney seat. That was entirely on running a horrible campaign for that district. That's the only, as far as I can tell, the only Bush, McCain, Romney seat Republicans weren't able to get back. Was the Arizona 2nd District. This was before Gabrielle Giffords got shot, and this was after as well. When these people are given opportunities to run, they lose. And rather than taking that as their lesson, they have just decided to go off the rails and just be completely insane. And I don't know if I don't know if it's going to take an electoral blowout for them to learn the lesson. I doubt anything can convince these people of anything, because they're election conspiracy theorists. If they lose the election, they're going to say it's because of voter fraud. So, can you actually convince these people that they need to correct their strategy? I'm not sure. It's really unfortunate, because I don't know a way out of this one. Whereas when the Oregon Republican Party is more sane than you, that's really saying something. It's really saying something.
Yeah, it really is saying something. But I think the reason why the whole voter fraud, I think, is a big thing is because when you can just, claim that you only lose when the other person cheats, you basically can run whatever campaign you want, because in your mind, you will always win.
Yeah, I mean, if you're a grifter like Kelly Ward, who is in there for the money and is just has just solidified an illegitimate grip on power in the Arizona Republican Party, frankly, I mean, she wins either way. If Republicans win, that's a vindication for her message. If they lose, it's just the proof that the Rhino Republicans stopped them. And the next time, if they nominate a true conservator, if they stop the Rhinos this time, they'll get a win. You can't reason with this nonsense. The only way you can actually beat it is to stop it in primaries. And Republicans didn't consolidate. I guess the only solace here is that Masters only got 39%. It's that Carrie Lake nearly lost.
Yeah.
With a Trump endorsement. I'm not sure what positive you're supposed to look here, but I will say that, again, the Masters campaign, I like that they're pivoting. I think I'm not going to rag on him as much, because he actually is trying now. But when your campaign is basically tailor-made to alienate specific groups in Arizona that you need to win, Social Security privatization, I support it. I think it's a good idea. You should not be saying that in public in a state with a lot of retirees. Abortion, there's a lot of upper scale suburban voters who aren't necessarily pro-choice, but are certainly not in favor of a fetal personhood amendment.
And Republicans out west, from what I've seen, tend to be a bit more lukewarm on the pro-life thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then on top of that, you have religious Mormons who also shifted against Republicans, and you're running a campaign tying yourself exclusively to just nonsense. Like I don't get the campaign strategy here, and I don't want to rag on him too much because I do like that he's trying. I'll rag on Carrie Lake more. She shouldn't have endorsed literal lunatic. She's running an insane campaign, and her only positive is that she's basically running against a horrendous Democratic nominee in Katie Hobbs, a truly abysmal candidate for Democrats. This is why she has a better chance of winning, even though she's a worse candidate. Is Katie Hobbs is a very, very, very bad candidate in more traditional bad candidate ways. It's just it's an entirely avoidable problem. They could have nominated Karen Taylor Robson. She probably would have won this thing by 5-10 against Katie Hobbs. It would not be close at all.
It wouldn't be.
Yeah, Brnovich, again, much better candidate against
or
Mark Kelly and
Cindy McCain or Meghan McCain even.
No. Cindy McCain. The McCains are never going to have any position of influence in the Republican Party. But someone like
don't
Jim
destroy
Lamont,
my dreams, please.
No, they're Cindy McCain has basically sided herself with the Democrats. It's not ever going to happen again. They've already chosen their battle.
But I mean, I think that after the election of Glenn Youngkin in 2021, I think a lot of Republicans had hope that Republican voters were finally coming to their senses, and that all came to a halt in Arizona. It's the
most states they have. In most states they have. The problem again is that the Republican base in Arizona is becoming increasingly rural, and the people that are being elected there are just increasingly nuts. All of the Republican members of Congress from Arizona are members of the Freedom Caucus. The Democrats in Arizona are liberal too. Mark Kelly's a party line vote. There's no way that can be denied whatsoever, but he at least pretends.
Right.
But still, there's no pretend. Andy Biggs isn't pretending to be a moderate. Daniel Schweikert isn't pretending to be a moderate.
David Schweikert also has his own issues.
Yeah. So yeah, I think Arizona is an entirely avoidable thing. I'm less angry about it than I normally would be, just because at least Masters seems to be trying, so points for that. But it could be too little, too late. He's going to have a hard time justifying. I think his justification for the fetal personhood thing is that he was just meaning fetal personhood after the third trimester. Right. That's never what I've used the term fetal person to be referred for. So good luck for him on that.
Right.
It's baffling. It's really baffling.
I think that we've not beaten this dead horse in Arizona. I think we've beaten a dead horse skeleton right now. So let's talk about JD Oz. I mean, Mehmet Vance. I mean, you know what? Go ahead. Two
sides of the same coin. Vance is just an abysmal nominee. This is predictable by pretty much anyone. Vance is the epitome of populism. When Republican candidates across the country are running a campaign on inflation, on the economy, on Joe Biden's left-wing agenda, JD Vance is not campaigning at all. He's not raising money. He's fundraising in Israel, talking about the great birth rates in Israel. And then when he comes back here, anytime he's in the news, it's for something stupid he said a year ago. This is the most idiotic campaign I've seen in a long time. The most inept campaign I've seen in a long time. I mean, he's lucky he's in Ohio. You need an actually historic. Tim Ryan cannot win here. It's actually not really mathematically possible. You need essentially a 10-point shift from 2020.
Yeah, the fact that
they lost. It's
that
not
he can't
happening.
Get above 50% is really telling. Even though he's leading, he's not getting anywhere near 50%.
Different polls are showing Vance more ahead now. Like the main issue with Vance is this should be a layup. If this was Matt Dolan, I don't think Matt Dolan would be a great senator. I think Matt Dolan is way too liberal on a lot of issues. I don't like the gun control thing he supported. I think he's supportive of BIF, granted, JD Vance is too, and of CHIPS. Vance is running a secretly on the issues economically moderate campaign. The problem is just his social policies are regressive in the actual sense of the term. And he's getting caught up for saying stupid things he said a year ago. This is the problem with running commentators for elected office. They say stupid things all the time. It's part of being a commentator. I probably said something pretty stupid maybe a year or two ago. I wouldn't expect to run for office and have no one dredge it up. The thing is that Vance has said when his own oppo file is dozens and dozens of pages long, you're going to get some stupid stuff. And he's not fundraising. He's not campaigning very well. He's not taking layup events like the Ukraine event. Rob Portman is there. Mike DeWine is there. Tim Ryan is there. JD Vance isn't there. Why? I don't know where he is. He's not campaigning.
But there's a reason why I referred to JD Vance on Tuesday night as the Katie Arrington of Harriet Hagemans, is because he's a former Never Trump guy who is actually a Yale educated venture capitalist. Somehow he's trying to pose himself as this hillbilly populist. Like,
I don't think he's posing as a hillbilly. I don't think he's posing as a populist. I think he genuinely believes in populism as an ideological concept, because unlike Masters populism tends to be more rhetorical. So it's more like, we're going to go after big tech, and then the proposals to go after big tech are basically nothing, or we're going to drain the swamp. And he's rhetorically populist.
Yeah.
Fiscally, he's still kind of, I would say he's kind of like, he's on that Lolbert to populist pipeline, but he's generally not, he's not running a fiscally liberal campaign. JD Vance's priorities, the issues he cares about, what he signed on for, is stuff like signing the American Compass Statement, supporting, sectoral bargaining. That's a concept you might not get 30 Democrats to vote for in the Senate, or at least you may get 10 or 20 Democrats to vote against that concept. JD Vance is incredibly concerned about birth rates. He seems to be apparently opposed to the concept of no-fault divorce. When I mean populist, I don't mean that populists can't talk about things people care about. Populists can't actually talk about things people care about. Lean into the economy, lean into a bunch of stuff. What a populist does is they are focusing on things nobody cares about. For example, fertility rates. Nobody cares about that right now. No-fault divorce. Are there people who care about that? Yeah, if you're a trad Catholic or an extremely regressive Protestant, maybe you care about this. Is this something anyone is caring about when the price of gas is $3.30? No. When inflation is going on? No. A smart populist focuses on the economy. A populist focuses on things nobody cares about and nobody's going to care about and go out to vote for. And this is why I think JD Vance is, when he becomes a senator, he may well only last a single term. I think he's going to find the job of being a senator very boring. I think he's going to find it to be very unfulfilling.
Yeah.
Because nobody in the Senate shares his priorities.
Right. And
nobody in the Senate does.
You might not have the greatest appreciation for someone like Matt Dolan or David McCormick, but you do have to admit that if they were the nominees, Pennsylvania would be likely R instead of tossed up, and Ohio would be safe R instead of lean R.
Oh, I would have, if I was in Ohio, I would have voted for Dolan, and I would have regrettably voted for Dolan. I would have preferred to vote for Timken or for what's the businessman guy. Even Mandel would have been better.
Oh,
not
the Mandel,
because it seems like he.
Gibbons,
the business Gibbs. Yeah. So I would have regrettably voted for Dolan, because I think he would be a particularly good senator, because the RNC would not have needed to put $28 million into this race. Granted, they can withdraw that at any time. That's an ad buy scheduled out. If this race narrows, or if it race broadens, and it looks like it's already starting to correct itself a little bit, that money goes away a little bit. I think the Arizona, I just think this is entirely avoidable. This could have been avoidable by two things. One, not nominating JD Vance. Again, this guy is out of whack with what most Republicans care about. He's going to not enjoy his job as senator, and he doesn't particularly care about the intricacies of running for office. You could have avoided this even by nominating Mandel. Mandel would at least be campaigning and fundraising. Would he be a great senator? I don't know, but he would be doing a better job campaigning than Vance. The other thing with Vance is, again, his propensity for saying stupid things. If he can shut his mouth, I think maybe some of his silence is that he just is shutting his mouth to avoid saying something stupid. It's pretty telling that most of the comments that come into the news are things he said a year ago. For example, that comment on no-fault divorce, that was said a year ago. Republicans could have gone after him for this in the primary. They did not. This is in his own oppo. A lot of this is in his own oppo dump. His own oppo folder. So much of this was avoidable in Ohio. We did not need to be in a situation where Republicans are spending money in Ohio. That should never have been. And if Dolan was the nominee, they would not have spent a single cent in Ohio federally, because Dolan would have this thing wrapped up. He would be winning by a DeWine-esque margin. Tim Ryan is not actually a great candidate. He's not actually a great campaigner. The problem is that JD Vance is pretty terrible. Tim Ryan only outperformed Biden by a few points. The guy actually has genuine vulnerabilities on social issues, his flip-flop on abortion, for example.
Didn't he used to be pro-life?
He used to be pro-life. Now he's in favor of no exceptions for abortion. Again, that's a challenge. But yeah, like I think that's about as much as I can say about Ohio. I'm more angry with Vance because this is entirely his fault. He does not. I think he thought that by running for Senate for Ohio, he would not have to do anything and could instead continue his day job of spreading populist talking points and caring about things nobody cares about. And instead, I think he's probably pretty upset that he's having to campaign and maybe that Peter Thiel is not giving him money.
I do have one more quick question about Ohio, which is that I think JD Vance is going to win, but do you think maybe we underestimate the chance that he could underperform Trump's 8-point margin?
I don't think we underestimate the chances. I wouldn't be shocked if he wins by like 6 or 7. I think the more likely scenario is that it's pretty similar. Maybe a slight overperformance from Trump. But again, this is a race they should be winning. This is a race Portman would have won by 20, maybe more. This is a race DeWine he's leading by double digits in polls. This should not be uniquely competitive compared to other Ohio races. The risk more so is that a closer Senate race could drag down some of the Republicans in competitive seats. Think,
Steve Shabbat.
Steve Shabbat, J.R. Majewski in the Marcy Kaptur seat, and that more competitive seat around
Madison
Cleveland.
Gilbert as well.
Yeah, those would be the concerns, that those more competitive districts could be less locks than they are because of an uncompetitive top of the ticket.
Well,
so
why did I think Gilbert's seat was in Akron instead of Cleveland?
They're right by each other. I call it suburban Cleveland, but they're right by each other. They're pretty much the same. It's the same metro area.
Okay. I know that you mentioned Nevada is actually a good case scenario for Republicans. But before we get to that, I'd actually like to talk about Georgia, because I think you might have some darts to throw at Herschel Walker, if I'm correct.
Mm-hmm. Honestly, I don't think Walker's running a terrible campaign because basically Georgia. I know Democrats love Raphael Warnock.
I think that Herschel Walker, though, is running a good campaign when he's compared to J.D. Vance and Blake Masters.
Oh, he's not running an awesome campaign, but what he's not done is said, when he does a flub, it's something people on Twitter talk about. It's not someone anyone in real life cares about. He's not saying, he can say a dumb thing on occasion, but he's not saying a dumb thing that can be used against him in a campaign ad. He's not saying, that people in violent marriages maybe shouldn't get a divorce. He's not saying that Black people are the reason why there's gun violence. When he's saying something dumb, it's saying, not understanding a concept about climate change or something. I think the big thing that Georgia has that other states don't is that Brian Kemp is going to win, and he's going to win re-election by a fairly large margin. And on top of that, Raphael Warnock is not actually as good as people think.
Right. And
Warnock is a vulnerable incumbent because he cannot attack Walker on personal issues as much as you would like, because he has his own personal issues that can be brought up to the front.
And I'll point out that in Georgia, with the polls showing Warnock leading, he too is also not getting above 50%.
Mm-hmm.
But although, mind you, Georgia, the polls have not tended to be that bad compared to the Midwest.
Yeah. So Georgia Walker's not running the greatest campaign in the world. The best thing I can say about it is he's running a very average mid-grade replacement level campaign. He's not below replacement level like Vance or like Masters.
Right.
He's running a campaign that is entirely serviceable and can win in Georgia maybe in a good year. I think I will be interested to see if there's a debate how it goes and if the race actually heats up towards the end, because a lot of the stuff Walker could be criticized for is mental health stuff and familial stuff. That's Raphael
Domestic
Warnock
violence.
Raphael Warnock really doesn't want to bring that stuff up because he has his own domestic issues. And I think it's just better for both of them. I think the reason why you've not seen a whole lot of this is that it's just generally better for both of them if they don't talk about it.
Yeah, because they would destroy each other.
Yeah, it's mutually assured destruction. If you run ads talking about Raphael Warnock, Herschel Walker's personal life, Raphael Warnock, if their ads run, if he's running ads about Herschel Walker's personal life and struggle with DID, you're going to get Herschel Walker the very next day running ads about how Raphael Warnock is a deadbeat dad who won't pay his child support.
Yeah,
like it's just a no-win scenario right there.
And I think that Walker, if he were running a good campaign, he could really make some inroads, particularly in Georgia's rural Black Belt, or maybe even in urban Atlanta. Like, I think there are people traditionally vote Democratic who would be receptive to someone like Herschel Walker if he were running a good campaign.
That's a theory. And again, I'm typically more skeptical of Black candidates doing better, Black Republicans doing better in Black areas. I will note that there was exactly one area, or one of the few areas, that Daniel Cameron outperformed Donald Trump in Kentucky when he won his AG race by 10
Louisville?
10 points. Yep, he did better in the black parts of Louisville. He did better by a statistically significant margin compared to the rest of the state.
Yeah, and Nevada's sort of the best case scenario, but I guess we'll talk about that but I also want to talk about New Hampshire, even though the primary hasn't happened yet. But let's talk about Nevada first. That seems to be the best case scenario because they seem to have a good candidate for Senate and a great candidate for governor.
Yep, they have a good candidate. Laxalt's running a very good campaign. It helps that Democrats have taken abortion off the table. They already codified abortion into law. So they can't attack Adam Laxalt on abortion because Laxalt has said specifically, this is a state issue. It's already settled. I don't think it's a federal issue. I have personal views, but I'm not going to legislate on them. That is exactly what Democrats say about abortion. You cannot go after Adam Laxalt for saying he's personally pro-life. You can't. That's because that's the Democratic position. That's generally the Democratic position is personally pro-life, publicly pro-choice, except the difference is he's like publicly the voters have spoken, the elected officials have spoken. I'm going to follow that. So they can't attack on that.
Increasingly in Pittsburgh, though, they're going after Democrats who even just say that. But anyway, Laxalt's running a good campaign. Republicans have the best shot of winning here. This is a state that's has those sort of diverse Hispanic, white working class voters that are more likely to flip. It's trended Republican in each of the last 3 presidential elections, even though it's not actually flipped yet. Republicans definitely have a shot at winning a Senate race, gubernatorial race, and all of the House seats. We have 3 of them rated as toss-ups. The others safe Republican. And in a really good year, they could flip control of one or both houses of the legislature, even though they're gerrymandered. So Nevada's looking pretty good. Republicans actually did well in Nevada. So, kudos to them for that. Is it going to be enough? We'll see. It's going to be competitive, but they actually did their work in Nevada, and I think it's paying off. It's kind of interesting to me how a lot of these Republicans in this cycle who've been doing really well with Hispanic voters have not taken a cue out of the playbook of the last presidential candidate who got really good numbers with Hispanics, which was George W. Bush. I've noticed that his playbook has not been used that often this time.
Well, the Bush playbook isn't going to come back, I don't think, but regardless of how it goes, I really don't think it's going to be, they're going to try to replicate that exactly, but what you can replicate is that working class appeal, more specifically religious appeal. Nevada has a lot of service workers, has a lot of lower income workers who are trending more Republican. That's just, it's really a demographic thing that makes Nevada really appealing for Republicans at this point.
Right. And I actually was watching, there was a friend of mine, Tabitha Muller, who was covering the attempt that Nevada did to repeal the state's death penalty. Nevada actually has a death penalty, and the local Democratic establishment in Las Vegas has been opposed to getting rid of it. I've noticed that could the Las Vegas Democratic Party truly be the last remaining moderate Democratic Party in the country?
I would still have Rhode Island on that list. But that could obviously change this time. It may be only a matter of time before the progressives sort of do take over Rhode Island, just as natural shifts come along. But Nevada has typically been very smart, and up until recently, their state party has been very smart. Now their state party is in the situation the Republicans are. The Republicans have been controlled by Ron Paul libertarians in Nevada at the party level throughout the last decade. Democrats are now controlled by literal Democratic socialists. So they're dealing with organizational struggles now as well. It's a pretty unique issue.
Yeah, and I will say this, we've thrown a lot of darts at the Arizona GOP. At least you can say one thing about them. They are not the New Hampshire Libertarian Party.
They're not. Yeah.
You know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
So anyway, let's talk about New Hampshire, which is the one major primary thing that hasn't happened yet. But I think we pretty much know who the nominee is going to be there, Don Bolduc.
Do we? I've not. Again, the polling I've seen indicates Bolduc could have a lead, but I don't think it's a sure thing yet. Right. I will say that Morse isn't running the most compelling campaign, and if Bolduc is the nominee, it's going to be pretty challenging for Republicans to flip the state. It's worth noting, of course, Maggie Hassan has had middling approvals for a very, very long time. If Sununu was in this race, this could probably be a lean Republican race at minimum. Right. He chose not to, and instead Republicans may again get blanked in New Hampshire federally because they're.
I've noticed this race has kind of moved off the board once Sununu announced he wasn't running.
Yeah, Sununu was the best hope here. It's not a done deal for Republicans. Morse in particular would be a totally fine Republican. You just rely more on the environment and on Hassan's middling approvals than you would on anything else.
I'm actually, speaking of New Hampshire, I'm actually not sure who the frontrunners for the 2 House seats are for the Republican nomination.
I think the second seems out of reach. I can't remember the first, but the first, there's potential risk that Caroline Leavitt could be the nominee, and she's running a very, very, very Trumpy conservative campaign. That's what I was meaning, that risk of being blanked again in New Hampshire. Sununu made the risky move of trying to keep the second district competitive to help a friend of his run for office, and that friend actually is not going to be the nominee.
Right.
So completely botched move right there.
Right. I mean, I liked what he did because it means that in a wave year, we have a chance at both seats. Right.
In theory, but in practice, it's a lot harder than you say. In again, I'm not saying specific. I don't think you needed to draw a gerrymander, but I do think keeping the exact drawing of the seat from a partisan perspective was very unwise at minimum.
Yeah, I mean, I might be able to pull up my map of New Hampshire, but like I actually tried drawing a couple maps there, and the more compact one, the one that had like one like bunched in the south, the other taking like the rest, that was both even.
Yeah, that would sound about right. That's not the traditional alignment. The traditional alignment puts like Coos County into the second district, among other things.
Yeah, that never made sense to me.
Yeah, it's more of an east-west split.
Yeah. Anyway, in terms of like, I know we're kind of got like 15 minutes left, or like what? Or I'm just want to make
about 15.
Yeah. I'm just curious to know, what House races like, might be on your radar that people are not talking about. Like for me, I've been noticing those polls that have like Alan Fung up in Rhode Island second. I'm wondering if that could be a sleeper.
That is, we have that one as a toss-up. I think we have it. We either have as a toss-up or leans Democratic. It's one of the two. I think that's the perfect example of a sleeper. You got a great Republican nominee. You got a district that has shifted to the right in recent years. You've got a Democratic Party that is kind of has internal divides.
But again,
and then Fung is just really, really, really popular in the district.
But again, on the whole popular Republican candidate, I mean, Molinaro was also a popular, and it was by all accounts like a 5-star candidate.
It's a special, again, the difference is that's a special election.
Right. So, and also the polls seem to be off there. Yeah.
Yeah, the polls were off, the special election. You have a bunch of other factors. Rhode Island is not the same as upstate New York. I think we still have it leans Democratic, I think, for Alan Fung, but I think he's a really, really good nominee. If there's a candidate that can flip that seat, it's him. And I think Democrats may regret not having gerrymandered it further.
All right. And I mean, yeah, I actually, believe it or not, drew a map in Rhode Island that actually I was able to make one of the seats Biden +5.
Yeah, you can make one that voted for Trump in 2016 very, very easily without splitting a lot of towns. Rural Rhode Island has shifted quite a bit over the years. The thing is, it's Providence. It's very, very liberal. Providence is parts of it in the second district. That was changed after 2010 to shore up David Cicilline. Actually, back then, the first district was the more competitive one because Langevin has had a fairly moderate record. It was Cicilline that was the problem candidate for Democrats. So yeah, the second is one I'd look at. That's really probably the typical one. Obviously, both of the Texas seats, all three of the border seats, 28.
You think that Flores could pull up a Biden +15 seat?
Yeah, they're opening up again. What we're seeing constantly is that the biggest issue Republicans are facing in these specials is with affluent college-educated voters. That's not really a thing. Affluent white college-educated voters, there's not a lot of those in the 34th.
Right.
So that's kind of one that's going to test the theory there of Republican gains among Latino voters.
Yeah, I mean, if Flores holds on, that's big.
That would be very big. Yes.
Yeah, and I've actually wondered whether or not maybe the red wave is fizzling out, but could still crash hard in the RGV.
I don't know. Yeah, if there's an area Republicans could do really well in, like kind of like in 2018, you had a blue wave nationwide. Republicans flipped 2 seats in Minnesota. Even in a neutral environment, you could very possibly see a scenario Republicans flip all 3 seats in South Texas. It's not out of the question.
Yeah. By the way, if we had more time, I would probably show you some of these maps that I've been working on. I know. I mean, I kind of I'm wondering if there's anything else we should go over, or like actually, yeah. What was our biggest nomination miss this cycle?
On the Republican side?
On the Republican side.
For Senate, it's I mean, just in terms of an actual, I think it's hard not to argue that just in terms of the actual status of the race and it being Vance is probably the biggest miss, but it's not the most impactful. The most impactful miss on the Republican side is definitely New Hampshire. Having that basically guaranteed, not guaranteed, but pretty well set toss, Senate flip in New Hampshire would have certainly reduced the Democratic odds of having of retaining control of the Senate. If you flip Nevada and New Hampshire, all of a sudden Democrats have got to flip 2 Republican states. Are they going to flip? Flipping Pennsylvania is one thing. Are they flipping Pennsylvania and Wisconsin or Pennsylvania and North Carolina? Probably not. That really does make it a lot more challenging if you have that second additional flip. So it's probably the Sununu not being the candidate and not even running in New Hampshire.
Right. So, I mean, the answer I personally would give would be, I guess the last thing, I know we're coming up against the clock here. The last thing I'd like to talk about would be the governor's races, because I think that actually is where some of our biggest misses were this year. I'm thinking Illinois. I'm thinking Maryland. I'm thinking what's about to happen in Massachusetts. It seems like we're going to nominate duds in those races.
Yeah. So to be fair, Maryland was always a stretch to hold. Kelly Schultz would have been a leans Democratic one at best. I think she would have done better. She certainly would have had a shot to win. That would have been a challenge. Illinois. Bailey could or not. Darren Bailey's not a good nominee for Illinois. At the same time, it is Illinois, and it's increasingly hard to win there. Basically, thankfully, in the gubernatorial races, Republicans flunked their nomination choices in states that are either out of hand or states they didn't have a chance of retaining after the current governor retired anyway, which would be your Massachusetts and Marylands of the world. States like Oregon, great recruiting. States like Georgia, great job holding off a primary challenge there. Wisconsin, I think, is kind of a dud. I really think Cleafish should have been the nominee there instead of Michaels.
And Michigan.
Michigan, definitely Michigan, but that was out of their control. That was purely you can't anticipate massive signature fraud. And again, that's more on the volunteers, but it wasn't from lack of trying that Michigan had a problem. It was purely from the signature issue.
And we don't even have to mention the guy in Pennsylvania who shall not be named.
Yeah, Dr. Yeah. Mastriano. Yeah, Mastriano. Yes. And even he still has a chance to win. But yeah.
What were Democrats thinking?
They were thinking that they could pull a fast one. They could have their cake and eat it too. Turns out you can't.
Yeah. There's a part of me that, by the way, wishes that that Illinois and Colorado could swap Joe O'Dea with Darren Bailey, or
because I wish they could move Joe O'Dea to Arizona. That would be really nice.
Yeah. Joe O'Dea, I think, has been running a pretty good campaign. It's not, like New Mexico where it's actually within reach, like Ron Chetty could actually win, but because like Colorado, I think, seems to be just off the board for yeah.
I mean, in theory, if there's a candidate who can win in Colorado, it's O'Dea. And best case is probably that money is spent. Democrats have to spend money in Colorado, kind of like an Ohio situation. But he's running he's running a respectable campaign. I've been impressed with O'Dea.
Yeah. I think there's, and especially compared with Heidi Ganahl, who I think there's been some complaints about the way she's run her campaign, especially going up against a really popular incumbent like Polis. But Ron Chetty, I think, has the potential to be the Glenn Youngkin of the South or of the Southwest.
Ron Chetty's a really, really good recruit. Yeah, he's a really, really good recruit.
Yeah, and one of the things he's been doing is he's actually been playing the whole abortion thing very wisely. He's been focusing specifically on late-term abortion and being able to attack Democrats on that. Yeah,
it's a good approach. It's a very, very good approach. And again, New Mexico is a state with a lot of lower income voters, a lot of Hispanic voters, a lot of voters that rely on oil and gas jobs. On paper, really good fit for Republicans.
Right, and I think I'll also take a point to mention that you point out that the dud candidates that we've been getting have either been in states they had a no chance in, or what was the other thing you said?
States that we had no chance in, or states where after the current governor leaves that we had no chance at holding, which would be your Massachusetts and Maryland.
Right.
I mean, again, Kelly Schultz maybe could have won, but it's still Maryland, and Larry Hogan was uniquely popular.
Yeah. I will also point out, though, in Wyoming, we did nominate for Secretary of State an election denier. And apparently the legislature, you say this.
Yeah. They're taking away the ability of him to manipulate elections.
Right. It's still not great, though, because I believe Wyoming doesn't have a lieutenant governor, so he's next in line if Mark Gordon. Yeah.
Probably unfortunate, I would say.
Yeah, it really is. But anyway, I mean, I know we're kind of running out of time here. So Eric, I'm really happy to have you on. I hope we can have you back on sometime. I hope it does not nearly a year before you come back on
Oh
the show.
yeah, yeah, same.
Yeah, for sure. And anyway, yeah, well, because I think we're gonna have a lot more to talk about, and I think it would be great to talk about it more.
Certainly after the election, yeah.
Yeah, for sure.